Welcome to Conversations with Administrators, a segment where campus leadership answers your questions about university operations and critical issues impacting Sam Houston State. Now, a word from University President, Dr. Elisa White.
Hello, welcome to a new semester of Conversations with Administrators, our monthly online forum to encourage open and frank dialogue among faculty, staff, and campus leadership. Sam Houston State University is fortunate to have so many engaged community members, and the goal of this communication series is to offer opportunities to ask questions and share information that will help us fulfill our mission. In addition to communicating more information to those who are interested, we want to dispel rumors and misinformation that might get in the way of effective campus operations. The feedback for this series has been overwhelmingly positive, and I appreciate all who have participated and who will participate.
Hello, and welcome to this year's new edition of Conversation with the Administrators. My name is Debbie Hatton from the Department of Mass Communication, and I am the advisor for the Houstonian, which is part of the Bearkat student media. Today, we are fortunate to have with us Jeanine Bias, Sam Houston State's first Chief Diversity Officer. She serves as a resource for advisement, consultation on issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, today we're going to be taking a closer look at the newly established Sam Houston State University's Diversity and Inclusion Initiative, Bearkats Belong, including the scope of the project, how it aligns with the university's strategic priorities, and answering a lot of questions that you have submitted. So without further delay, I'm going to turn it over to Jeanine.
All right, thanks, Debbie. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share screen and go through a bit of a PowerPoint that I've prepared, and then I'll be ready for your questions, Debbie.
Okay.
So I wanted to start off today's session by just giving an introduction to the concept of Bearkats Belong. And I can't do that without really explaining the perspective that I come from as the Chief Diversity Officer. And so this picture, which is very near and dear to me, is a picture of me in an orientation group as a student here at Sam Houston. And I think it's important to understand my story as we continue to develop and understand the story of Sam Houston and the perspective that I come from and the thoughts that I come from. I am a first-generation student. I'm from San Antonio, Texas, and coming to Sam Houston literally changed the course of my life and changed who I was and who I wanted to become as a professional. I came to the institution knowing two other people, and the services, the resources, the people I met, the professors, the classes that I took really made this place a home for me. And when I decided to go into higher education upon graduation, one of the rationales that I used in going into higher education was I want students to have a similar experience that I did. Questioning what was I going to do and questioning who was I going to become. When I left Sam Houston 4.5 years later, I was on a trajectory to actually become that person. And so wanting students to have that similar experience and be connected to the resources, even that I had then, is still important to me now, almost 30 years later. And so it's important to understand that trajectory of getting into higher education. I've been into higher education since I graduated from Sam Houston, worked at 2 previous institutions before coming back here, and have had the opportunity to really work across different departments, divisions, with all the same focus. And I didn't realize it then until I really started getting into DEI work, is that I've always done this work. Regardless of what positions that I might have been. I started off in admissions. I moved into residence life, but there was always a caveat of bringing this inclusive nature to this work. And so I think that's important as we continue these conversations. And as I started to delve into what specifically diversity, equity, inclusion looks like in higher education, not just as initiatives, but as foundational concepts that an institution can move forward based off of. So now that you know a little bit about me, I also want to talk a little bit about who Sam Houston is and who Sam Houston has become. And Sam Houston, I really believe that our story is still being written. When we talk about Sam Houston, we talk about its founding and we talk about who our namesake is, and the institution, while being around for 140 years and really being centered around this concept of service, the institution has changed a lot over the last 140 years. And needs to continue to define itself. And so that's why I say its story is still being written. Our institution is now a majority minority institution with also more than 50% first generation college students. The institution did not look like that when I was a student. And so we need to really make sure that we are consistently and intentionally moving forward with who our students are, who our faculty and staff are, as we develop new programs and initiatives to address the current needs, not only of the institution internally, but of our community, as a state, and as really the nation and in the world. I'm really proud to be a part of the process of our strategic plan. And in that strategic plan, we really laid out some values that I think that everybody at the institution can really gravitate to. And those values really consist of student success and support being number one. And that success is not just something that we should value, but also a responsibility that we have. When we enroll students into our institution, it is a responsibility that we have to make sure that they're deemed successful. Academic excellence, service and community engagement. Once again, this is something that's been a foundation of Sam Houston since its inception. Inclusive excellence, and that's a term, that's not only a term, but it's also a framework in order for us to make sure that people feel like there is a home here at Sam Houston, much like I did when I was a student. Being very collaborative and breaking down silos. This concept of honor that is in our ring ceremony, and really talking about the value of honor. And then last but not least, creativity and innovation. I think that should really be a foundation of how we move forward, because as the world changes, we need to be able to be creative and innovative with it. But this brings about, when combined, the story of little old me and the story of 140-year-old institution. What's the vision of diversity, equity, and inclusion as we move forward as an institution? And so I want to make sure that I define the concepts a little bit, and definitely as our office has begun to develop, we have educational series around this, but I want to give just some brief definitions so we can all be on the same page of what we're actually talking about. And so diversity is about representation. But when we talk about representation, we're not just talking about primary things that somebody might be able to see from face value, which a lot of times when we talk about diversity, people see color or ethnicity, or they see gender. But we're talking well beyond that in representation, but it is still important for some of those primary things to be represented across the institution. When we have diversity, though, all of these concepts can be different and can operate outside of each other. You have equity, which is about fairness, which is about access, which is about opportunity to some of the resources that people have not always had. And so we want to make sure that as we increase our diversity, we also take a look at how equitable our programs and processes are. In doing so, we need to look at how inclusive those things are. Inclusion really talks about somebody being accepted, somebody being valued. And this image, and I really love this, is when we actually utilize the values of all three of these is where we get to the concept of belonging. And that's where the Bearkats Belonging Initiative campaign, and really more of a culture set for our institution comes from. When we get these three things right, or when these three things are moving all on the same consistent path, is when we can get the sense of belonging at our institution that I truly believe is important. Along with this comes some intentionality and some strategy. I think when I first started this work in diversity, equity, and inclusion, it was all about who has the best practice that's out there, who's doing the latest program that's out there. And I soon realized that every institution is different. And we really need to start being strategic about how we implement diversity, equity, inclusion on our campuses. And so I've devised in year one for this role and for the office and initiatives that we have some really intentional priorities to have us move forward. These are hopefully set for us to increase some awareness and really move the concept and the value of DEI to the next level. And so I call it three things: being diversity forward, equity minded, and being inclusion focused. Being diversity forward is understanding who we are as an institution, as I mentioned, is that, you know, as an institution that has just reached HSI status, who is over 50% of students of color, who is military friendly, who is first generation, we need to recognize that and really meet the needs of that student population. Some of that comes with building cultural capacity and cultural competency amongst our community. We have to really start there. There's a lot of things where people need to understand who we are and cross those boundaries and let people understand who you are. Introduce yourself in a different way. We also need to increase the representation of our faculty, staff, and students. Talk a lot about the demographic of our students, but the representation of our faculty and staff don't mirror that. If you look at the demographic of just merely our faculty are only 15% people that identify as color, and we need to work on that. And last but not least, we need to increase the retention and graduation rates of systemically marginalized students. When you look at the disaggregated data, those students, and this is an equity issue, those students are not performing as well as other students. And so we need to not only understand the gap and why it exists, but figure out programs and initiatives to help decrease that gap. Under being equity minded, we need to start and shift from a deficit mindset. We talk a lot about students being underprepared when they come to the institution, but the students have done everything that they needed to do to be accepted to our institution. I think, and it's not just Sam Houston, but a lot of institutions aren't prepared for their students. And we need to continue to look at ways that we can become more student-centered and be prepared for the students that we are admitting to the institution. And then last but not least, we need to be inclusion focused. As we admit students, as we retain and attract faculty and employees to our institution, we need to look at ways to implement a true servingness of the term HSI. We need to look at ways that we can make sure people feel valued and feel accepted and feel respected on our campus. We have some really great programs that we've done, but we need to scale them to size so they can be more effective to more people. And then we need to increase some inclusive spaces. That's another thing that's been really important about this campaign is really understanding that there needs to be places where people feel like they're valued and accepted across campus. I just want to, before Debbie jumps in, is remind the campus community about some upcoming events and programs. Hopefully you'll be receiving an email on these soon, but the next week is National HSI Week, which this will be the second year that we've participated in this event. A part of that event will be a town hall series, but also a monthly series that I'm coining Donuts and Dialogue that students, faculty, and staff can attend just to have conversations really about DEI. And then also a reminder that our IDEA Institute will begin at the end of the month. So with that, Debbie, I'm going to stop my screen share and let you ask questions away.
As you all can see, this is going to be an exciting initiative and an exciting time at Sam Houston State University. Now, I will tell you, I'll go ahead and preface this by saying a lot of these questions are very challenging, but I've known Jeanine for years. Jeanine and I have gone through quite a few committees together. And the one thing I do know is she's never going to back off of a challenge. So with that being said, the first question that we have for you today, Jeanine, is Isn't DEI just another term for affirmative action?
Oh, when you said
I
jump
warned
in, we're leaping into this. Okay. So the short answer is no. The longer answer of this is, let's talk about what affirmative action is. Affirmative action is and was, even in the past, is a compliance-based initiative that was set out to increase steps to increase diversity among companies, among colleges, among admissions, all those things. It was an initiative that is a part of the value of diversity, but it is not DEI. So one, it was really just concentrated solely on the diversity aspect and really forgot about the notions of equity and inclusion as part of it. I think in some ways, affirmative action initiatives were a little deficient because they were deemed superficial in nature, and really the success of any type of programming was really attributed to tokenism of those that may have been hired under that. The concept of DEI and the concept of each of diversity, equity, and inclusion is really about a culture shift and a mindset change that is about the institution making a commitment to move forward for diversity, equity, inclusion, for the benefits that it brings to the institution.
Okay, here's another question that catapults, I think, off of that one.
Okay.
What steps are being taken to ensure that the focus on diversity and inclusion in our hiring practices at Sam Houston State is not overshadowing the acquisition of the best talent that applies for the job?
Great question. And it's not a either or, it's a both and. I think that diversity and inclusion efforts, when done correctly, enhance the opportunity for us to have the best candidate pool possible. Really, diversity, equity, inclusion efforts specifically related to recruitment and hiring are about casting a wide net. Oftentimes, we get, as an institution, in this pond, really, and we're fishing in the same pond. Applying DEI initiatives and just that mindset puts us in an ocean to cast a wide net, to bring the better or the best talent to the table. And I think also, more importantly, focusing on particularly the equity and inclusion piece of DEI helps us keep the best talent. And so I don't think that focusing on DEI is a deterrent for the best talent, but I think it increases our opportunity to have the best people here at the institution and at the table.
Okay. Research suggests that over 70% of a person's day-to-day happiness interaction stems from the atmosphere created by their direct supervisor. What will be done to develop inclusive leadership competencies in our middle management, department chairs, etc., and on our executive levels of leadership at Sam Houston State?
Sure. So let's talk about the executive level first. And I think a lot of the things that we've even started talking about, we'll start with a strategic plan, and have started with some conversations around who we are and who we want to be. So at the leadership level, we've been having these conversations about making sure that these concepts aren't just seen as initiatives set aside. This is something that the CDO does, but this is something that's woven throughout the institution. From the middle management lens, we've really been trying to collaborate with human resources on increasing some programming, some workshops, some trainings in the Management Academy and in the Management Institute that talk about some of these things to help increase inclusion, equity in the workforce. Some of that is something as simple as onboarding. When we talk about having employees come to our institution, orientation is one thing. Getting your human resources packet and your benefits is one thing, but how are you onboarded into the university? How do you learn about the university traditions? How do you know that on the wall in the center of campus does say the measure of a life is its service? Have you taken a tour of the campus when you've come here? But also, as the question really talks about, how have you started to infuse this into a department, into a division? Have you asked a new employee what their goals are first 30 days? Those are things that we'll continue to work with human resources on in developing some programming in that academy. I know our assistant director of inclusion initiatives will be working with human resources later on in the semester about some programming related to millennials in the workforce that is about that's specific for managers. Because and different generations and understanding that as well.
Okay. This question deals with diversity of thought, which it's a form of diversity and includes non-visible markers such as personality preferences, values, perspectives, and experiences. And all this plays a very important role in inclusion and belonging. What plans do you have to promote awareness and diversity of thought?
Sure. So I think that just by the submission of the question, it goes back to that building capacity and building cultural competency. In our Idea Institute, in the foundations course, we talk about really what diversity means. And there is this, this graphic that we use that talks about the primary diversity that people see, which is the color of somebody's skin, which is maybe their age, maybe their gender, if you can tell that or decipher that. Sometimes a lot of it is assumptions though. But we really talk about how the person, somebody is more than that, where their background, where they come from, their religion, the job level that they have, and looking at the trajectory of somebody's intersectionality is a whole lot more. But at the end of that, we also talk about how who you are has also developed into your experiences, your perspectives, and ultimately what this diversity of thought is stating, that our experiences have brought us to a point where we have differing opinions, and all those opinions are valuable when we bring them to the table. So it's diversity of thought is not different than other diversities. It's a part of it, and it's one and the same. And I think that we need to start understanding that diversity is not a simple topic. It's not as simple as check boxes on a census. It is more about looking at the individualism of individuals and what they bring to the table, and that their voice is important.
It's interesting you say that, because our next question says, during our back to school meeting, it seemed that all the discussion around the DEI initiative and its programs were accompanied with political statements. What can be done to keep university personnel from politicizing DEI and turning people against it? And how should we handle these statements whenever we hear them, when we're in a meeting and we hear someone politicizing something that we all should be embracing?
Yeah. And it's interesting. So my background is in political science and public policy. And so, but I am a purist and idealist at heart. And so it's interesting when concepts like diversity, equity, inclusion become cornerstones of politics. And so first and foremost, I want to say that these concepts can live outside of a world of politics, and shouldn't necessarily be politicized. Now, let me jump back into the real world and understand that it is. And unfortunately, I think sometimes based on the way that the question is asked, I don't think it's necessarily politicized, but it's given a voice that's centered around some ideologies that are about politics. And we need to be able to separate those for the large part. The university is a political organization. We can't support one side or one initiative, or one side or one ideology over another. We have to live where we celebrate people for who they are, but we can't make a stance on one political bill or one political action or defend it in any way. But it makes it very interesting when you live in a state that is a very red state, but a federal government that is blue. And so from a compliance standpoint, we have to negotiate that and shift that and make sure that we understand that. But from an everyday institutional lens, we don't have to politicize these concepts because they live outside of politics. I don't think that there is a point in which we say that this is a conservative topic or this is a liberal topic. This is just something that we need to do as an institution. I think the second part of the question asked, what should we do when we hear things being politicized? And I think first and foremost, it's important to understand that people are giving voice to their concerns or their perspectives. I think that multiple sides need to be heard, but if it's something that becomes to the point where the university can't make a stance on something one way or another, I think this is where we need to understand where our policies live and understand that the university can't go as far as to make a statement or be in support of or be in opposition of certain things that have been politicized. But what we can do is make sure that we've removed barriers for people to voice their opinion, that we offer programming that offers both sides of the coin, and move forward from there. I don't want to say that we can't talk about it, because I think sometimes we need to talk about it, but we need to understand how far the institution can go.
And I think that's one of the real important parts of this, is that we need to have these difficult discussions.
Yeah.
Because if we can't on higher education have difficult discussions in a civilized manner, then we have bigger problems than what they do out. And that's coming from someone in the media. So
I mean, absolutely. It's where higher education is sometimes can be a bubble where we figure these things out, and we don't have to be in, whether it be in media or other places where you have to pick a side. We don't have to pick a side. What we need to do is make sure that people are equipped with all the information that they know, in which they can decide and make conscious decisions and educated decision on which side they want to land on. The institution just needs to be able to teach and educate on how people can pick a side.
Right. I'm going to pivot a little bit, because I know on one of your last slides, you had information about HSI and exciting events that are coming up. So we have a couple of questions on HSI, but I know that you're going to really drill in for the people who submitted questions dealing with us being a Hispanic serving institution. Please go to those town halls next week, because that's when Jeanine is really going to drill down and talk about those more granular than what we can get to. We just don't have time today to get to those, but I took a couple of questions that I do want to ask. Based on the research, it appears that Sam Houston State's HSI type, try saying that, is defined by Gina Garcia as Latina X producing. Does HSI have, this Sam Houston State have plans to move towards a Latina X serving institution?
First and foremost, I want to agree with the person that submitted the question. I think that when looking at Gina Garcia's research, that's kind of where we fall on the matrix and rubrics, but that's a beginning and that's not an end. And I really want to appreciate where the university has come from on this standpoint, that last year we kind of put together an HSI working group to really assess who Sam Houston was from the HSI lens. And there were 4 critical priorities that we had, one being doing a DEI audit and an inventory of our programs specifically related to this Hispanic serving institution status. Also looking at peer institutions and what they had to say about achieving and keeping the HSI status, looking at and better understanding our funding opportunities that are related, And then also, last but certainly not least, being communicative and being transparent about those initiatives. And so I think some of the things that we learned from that, and also the two previous institutions I worked with were also HSIs, is that we are going in the right direction. A lot of our peer institutions said, I wish we would have done what y'all are doing now. I wish we would have taken a better look from an HSI perspective versus just letting it happen and not incorporating it into the culture, into the communication stream, being more intentional. That's one of the things that a lot of the institutions really talked about. And some of them still have some work to do. Some of the institutions we talked about lost HSI status and then regained it. And so I'm a firm believer in learning from other people's mistakes and not making our own. And so now that we've actually received the designation, there are some things that we will start doing to move forward. I think to answer the submitter's question, the very first thing that we need to do, though, is define what servingness is and what that means on the institutional level, but also what that means as colleges, departments. And some of that comes from asking our students what that means and not just looking to other institutions, not just looking in the research, but asking our students, how can we better serve you?
Can you give us any specifics about how Sam Houston is going to be a very vibrant HSI campus?
Sure. I think the term vibrant suggests one of the things that I had in the PowerPoint is increasing some physical space and some cultural spaces around. And that's not just for our Hispanic community, but that's for lots of different segments of our community, and making sure that you feel like you're seen and this campus is seen as a Hispanic serving institution. So whether that be more signage that is in dual language, whether that be more events that speak to the Hispanic culture, all of those things align with what we need to do. I also think that we need to continue to culture build. That vibrancy needs to look similar in a lot of communities. We need to make sure that this is a thread throughout and not just another initiative. HSI is who we are and not just what we do. It's a responsibility now that we have to the 26% students that we have on our campus, but bigger than that, it's a responsibility that we have as an institution and as the growing population of different types of students that are coming to our campus to make sure that they are having this vibrant experience on our campus. And so whether it's programming, whether it's initiatives, I'm very excited at the end of HSI week, we also have a Hispanic student experience that upperclassmen will come in and speak with new freshmen and transfers about what their experience is here on our campus, looking at doing, like I said, more things in dual language, really incorporating enrollment success into a lot of the conversations. One of the biggest things in doing focus groups with our students, they've talked about the family a lot and wanting to focus on how to integrate their family and the concept of family into a lot of our programming. So those are some things that we are currently working on.
Great, because I know it's in our department, we have a Spanish language radio station. A lot of people on campus don't know that we have that over here. And the family, our students love to be able to speak on the air and have their family here if they're in San Antonio or, Houston, wherever they are at. That's a big thing. We get lots of calls from moms and dads.
That's how they can support. Yeah.
Yes, and they're there listening. They're cheering them on. It is wonderful to do. And just to reiterate, September the 12th in room 320 of the LSC is when we will have the faculty staff town hall on HSI. So I hope to see everyone there. Changing tracks just a little bit. We have somebody who wants to know what the university's strategy to support students with disabilities is and how to promote their success potential.
Sure. I think one, we've always had a Students with Disabilities office, but once again, and I've told many partners, I've told campus leadership this phrase: we need to shift from just programs and initiatives to being a more service-oriented and resource-oriented institution. And so when we look at our students with disabilities, one, it's understanding that students with disabilities, it is a far, there's multiple levels of disabilities. I think sometimes people only think of physical disabilities or only think of things that are in the mainstream, but we need to understand that when we talk about disability, we can be talking about short-term or long-term. We can be talking about physical or cognitive. And we need to understand, first of all, what students are we serving? I think the other thing is, in order to promote their success and potential, is we need to ask students what they need. It goes back to what I said before, just like with our Hispanic students. I think we consider our students a lot, and I had a colleague use this phrase: we consider our students, but we don't necessarily consult our students. And we need to start consulting our students more with what their needs are. So we're not guessing. So we're not just saying, oh, we do all of this programming, but the student says, all I wanted was this. And so, having conversations, not just with the Disability Services Office, the employees and the staff that service the students, but really talking to the students, assessing the programs that we can currently give to the students, and finding out, are these things helpful? And then asking them, what are some other things will be helpful and help deem successful for you to move forward. Some of those are physical accessibility issues that we have on campus. Some of those could be note-taking, but we need to make sure that we are on the right track. Once again, we're not the same institution as we were before. Should we be providing the same services? Let's ask those students, what are we doing that has been helpful for you? But what can we do? What challenges do you still have? And how can we adjust our services to match your needs?
Good, good. Our next question is from a person who is not sure about Sam Houston State's LGBTQIA resources, nor where to direct people to find them. I mean, it's something that you need to educate us all on.
Sure. So there are a couple of different avenues, and for students, mostly they reside in the area or the Division of Student Affairs. For programming, our Center for Diversity and Intercultural Affairs does do programming related to the LGBTQIA+ community. But as far as resources and services, two areas that I will point our students to is, first and foremost, our counseling center, which has a program called Haven that's associated with it. They do have a website that lists a lot of resources, not only about the LGBTQIA community, but also things internal to Sam Houston and external to Sam Houston on ways people can participate. Those in-depth questions, there's a list of allies that are across campus that can be contacted that website has. And then also for students, and this is more compliance related, but for students that are having problems or struggling or have questions related to whether they don't feel included, or even if it goes as far as discrimination, our Equity and Title IX office provides a lot of information related to the community as well. Their website is also a good resource to look for gender neutral restrooms or terminology, doing some program related to that. Under the current Biden administration, there are certain protections for the LGBT community that are outlined by the federal government that the university needs to abide by. And so I would really point anybody that has questions to both the Counseling Center and Equity and Title IX. But then also, if anybody, and this is any community, because we've talked about a lot of different intersectionalities here today, but reach out to me. I am a resource across campus, and if you don't know, I can point you in the right direction. And so I always want to make sure that I serve as a resource to anybody that has a question related to really, where do I go?
This is great. Our next question is a great question because it deals with something that a lot of times we forget about, and that's our online students. So what will Sam Houston's DEI initiative do to be inclusive of our online students?
I think this is a population of students that we started to understand a whole lot more when all of us had to shift online, right? Um, but it's a question of first and foremost access and what our responsibility is to those students and how they are accessing the university and the services that we have. I think that also this is kind of stepping into some of our own privilege of what a traditional campus environment is like. I know a little bit about what it means to be an online student. My master's program was completely online. And so I only visited the campus that I got my master's degree from maybe 3-4 times in graduation in the course of 2 years. So we've started some things like trying to be more transparent with our communication. We send out a newsletter once a month to the entire campus community, but I don't think doing a newsletter is just enough. But once again, when we talked about the other populations, I think it's about asking the students what their wants and needs are. Sometimes students are solely virtual and solely online because they want to get their degree done, and they just want to make sure that Blackboard is up and they can access their professors' emails, but then you have another group of students that want that experience in a virtual setting. And so I know that Student Affairs has worked on doing some things live stream. I know other departments have worked on trying to do enrollment success. There is, tours that are online, but I think that there's also some things that we can do to reach out to those students a little bit more. And it's about asking them. And so as we start getting into more and more initiatives and look at different populations on our campus, I've had lots of questions about that online community. And I'll be honest, it's one that I'm still trying to put my finger on as far as how can we best service the online student community, because there are communities within that community. When we're looking at doctoral and master's programs, it's a whole lot different than looking at undergraduate programs. And so trying to figure out the best way forward is going to be important before just saying this is the initiatives that we have. And so I think right now we're concentrating on at least opening up a line of communication with online students, and then in the future building some initiatives that are directly related. We can't just shift the programs that we have and turn on Zoom and make it online. We have to make it fitting for our online student community.
Okay. Enough with the easy questions. Let's go back to some of these more difficult questions. Because this next one stems from, well, we're in Texas. We are north of Montgomery County. A lot of our students come from Montgomery County, Walker County, this area. So someone would like to know what the university is going to do to include more conservative opinions and thoughts and voices into our campus plans.
I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know that conservative voices were excluded. But obviously the submitter might feel like their voice is not being heard. And so I continue to say, like I've said in the previous questions, that we need to look at diversity from a more complex lens and not drill it down to be so simplistic as I think sometimes, whether it be the media or other people lend it to be. I also think, particularly when we're looking at the concept of inclusion and ultimately the outcome of belonging, we need to make sure that everybody feels like their voices are being heard. I think the university over the past few years has done a great job in being transparent about their communication, being able to offer feedback, being able to offer this conversation with administrators for people to be able to ask questions, having multiple layers of input on the strategic plan. So I think it starts there. I think it starts with not only making sure that there are more voices across the board, but those voices need to make sure that they're submitting their ideas and their opinions through those avenues. But once again, it's not just about one voice over another. It's not about exchanging seats at the table. It's about adding seats to the table. And I want to make sure that it's not the notion of more or less, it's the notion of making sure that everyone's voices are being heard.
Good. This submitter would like to know, doesn't creating separate groups or clubs with specific gender or ethnic titles further divide rather than promote inclusivity?
Sure. And in talking about inclusion, this is one of the first things that I started to research because this question comes up often. And how does separation influence inclusion? And I'll use this example, Debbie, is if we went to a restaurant and there are different menu options on the table. You order one meal and I order another. If we both have a great experience, we don't necessarily have to eat the same meal. And so inclusion works in the same way. I think a lot of times when you feel a part of a piece, you feel closer to the whole. And particularly with communities, and this is not just communities of gender or communities of color. I spoke a little bit before about our millennial population and of employees. Or the assistant director in our office identifies himself as a millennial student. And while we work great together, we are not of the same generation. And so oftentimes he will go meet with, he has standing appointments to go meet with those that are around, his same gender, his same management level, just to be around something a little bit different, that's different than what he's exposed to in this office environment. And I think that helps for development and the growth of an individual, particularly for communities that are marginalized, or you might not see somebody that is like you in your department, sometimes in your classroom, maybe in other areas. Finding a place and space where you feel closer to somebody is important. One, to go back to the space that you might not feel like you're 100% included, but ultimately it makes you feel like you are a piece that's a part of the whole. And so I think that those communities, whether it's on our 250 student organizations or within the 5 employee resource groups that we have, that people find their place. And when you find your place, or when you find your meal, if that's what you enjoy, that contributes to the positive experience that you have here at the institution.
Good. Our next question comes from someone who says, or who is asking, for Sam Houston State to truly be diverse and inclusive, the university can not only focus on people of color or issues that they're concerned about. Based on what this individual has seen and heard recently, this seems to be the case. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I don't sit in the place, in the space that this individual might. I can say that I don't necessarily see that. From my perspective, I think the university is trying to concentrate on multiple identities, multiple intersections, but at the same time, I can't dismiss that person's feeling. And understanding that we do need to concentrate on representation, because that's who our students are, and that's where we might be lagging compared to the demographic of our students. But I think that we need to look at, once again, diversity from a bigger lens. It's not just about color, it's not just about gender, it's about having multiple perspectives, experiences, everything that makes us a better place to be. And so I would hope that the submitter really looks at how we're not just looking at color, but we're looking at how to bring a diverse mindset to the table and what we might be lacking. A lot of times in the DEI space, they talk about the term fit. And when I first started presenting and researching on particularly recruitment and retention, I used to say, I hate the term fit, because it really gave the notion that we're looking for yet another person that's just like us. And over the past couple of years, and with more research, looking at the term fit less like a pair of jeans. We all have that favorite pair of 5 pairs of jeans. We all buy from the same company, from the same store, because those fit well. We need to not think about fit in that way, but think of fit like a puzzle piece. My dad and I used to put together puzzles when I was much younger, on the weekends. And a puzzle, when you look at it, it's a whole bunch of pieces, but when you put them together, if there's a puzzle, if there's something missing, it's a very unique piece. And when you put it in the space, that's what makes it fit. And we need to start looking at more puzzle pieces to fit our organization versus pair of jeans.
Thank you, Jeanine. Today for DEI, these initiatives can really provoke difficult questions and difficult discussions. And I want to thank you for not shying away and being ready to answer anything that is thrown at you. And we have thrown some stuff at you today, and I think you've done a great job with these difficult dialogues. So we've reached the end of our session. For this session, we want to give everyone enough time to get to the next upcoming event on campus. So we want you to know that we would like for you to join our next conversation with administrators, which is going to be setting a vision for the future growth, student success, and enrollment with Dr. Ann Galliard and Dr. Ann Theodori. The date will be and time will be announced soon, so be sure to watch your inbox for that invite, and please take this opportunity to ask questions, because like I said, we need to have these discussions on campus. So thank you. Jeanine, do you have any last minute things you would like to say as we're signing off?
Only that I want to thank you, for this and the opportunity to talk to the campus community about diversity, equity, inclusion on campus. And I invite the difficult conversation. I always say that diversity is not done right if it's easy. And DEI is a topic that I'm very passionate about, but it's hard work and it's going to take some time. And we're not just trying to do initiatives and programming, but we are trying to make sure that we're setting a campus culture for now and for the future. And so, I continue to invite those conversations. For anybody that we weren't able to get to their questions, please feel free to send me an email or reach out to me or attend any of our programming in order to get those questions answered so we can move forward. But I appreciate you.
Yes, I appreciate you too. Thank you all for attending. And I hope you have a wonderful semester.